When I was 22, I started renting the downstairs apartment in my parents' house. It was a way to save money, but I also wanted a little more privacy. Even though my parents were away a decent amount, it still felt like I had no real freedom. I couldn't even have friends or girls over in peace. The downstairs apartment was separated from the main house by a lockable door in the stairway. It had an open layout with a mini kitchen that was part of the living room area. Further down the hall were my bedroom, bathroom, and laundry room. There was also a side entrance that led directly into the living room. This all happened on a weekend when my parents were away, so I had the whole place to myself. That meant I could be as loud as I wanted. I invited my friends, Anthony and Jay, over just to shoot the shit and have a couple drinks. We hung out on the couch watching the hockey game. Since my parents weren't home, we were blasting music while we chilled. I wouldn't say I got drunk, but by the end of the game, I definitely had a solid buzz going. Whenever my parents were away, I'd keep the door between my apartment and the upstairs unlocked, since I didn't have to worry about them randomly coming downstairs. I kept the drinks in the fridge upstairs since it was bigger, and honestly just worked better. Since both Anthony and Jay had been drinking, and they had driven over, they decided to crash at my place for the night. The couch downstairs was massive. If you laid the right way, it could easily sleep 3 people. After a long night of drinking and hanging out, I said goodnight and went to my room to sleep. I woke up in bed a few hours later. It was still dark, probably the middle of the night or early morning. What woke me up was the sound of footsteps upstairs. Someone was walking around up there. It wasn't exactly alarming at first. I just figured it was Anthony or Jay. Maybe they went upstairs to check my parents' fridge for cold water or something. That seemed like a natural assumption. So, I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. But then just a couple minutes later, I heard something else. The sound of my bedroom doorknob turning. Someone was trying to open the door, but it was locked. I always lock my bedroom door. It's just a force of habit. Still half asleep, I wondered why either of them would be trying to come in, but I was tired and figured if I just didn't say anything and pretended to be asleep, they'd go back to bed on their own. Maybe that sounds weird, but I just didn't have the energy to deal with it, and it worked. I fell back asleep shortly after. When I woke up the next morning, Anthony was already gone, but Jay was still asleep on the couch. As soon as he heard me open the fridge, he started moving around and rubbing his eyes. I asked him if he had tried to come into my room last night. He said no, at least he didn't think so, but admitted he didn't really remember much because he got pretty drunk. He and I went to a nearby deli to grab bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches with coffee. We ate them outside in my backyard, just talking and enjoying the morning. Jay left not long after that, and I went about my day as usual. I didn't even bother asking Anthony if he had tried to come into my room. Honestly, I didn't care that much. It really wasn't a big deal at the time. I think I spent most of that Saturday out of the house, hanging out with other friends. I got back home pretty late that night. I wasn't drunk or anything by then, it was more of a slow, all-day kind of outing. I had sobered up. Still, I was beat. I grabbed a snack, washed up, and went straight to bed. Well, when I say went to bed, I really mean I crawled into bed and watched TV for about an hour. But the moment I turned the TV off, I heard it. Creaks and soft thumps from above. It almost sounded like footsteps similar to the night before. They came from directly overhead in the kitchen upstairs. I had to really focus and listen. But then the sound stopped. That's when I felt my heart start to race. A subtle wave of nervous energy began to build in my gut. For a few minutes, I sat up in bed, just waiting to hear something else. Eventually, I laid back down and tried to relax, telling myself it was probably just normal house settling noises. My mind was playing tricks on me, making them sound louder and more ominous than they actually were. I couldn't have been more wrong. I should have trusted my gut the moment I heard the doorknob to my bedroom move again. I sprang up so fast, you'd think I was about to get hit by a bus. The doorknob only moved for a couple of seconds, just like the night before, but this time it was followed by a light knock. A knock and then more rattling of the knob. I didn't say a word. I slowly reached for my phone, which was on the bed beside me, and started frantically texting my family, along with Anthony and Jay. Deep down, I knew the chances of it being one of my friends were basically zero. But I was still hoping, just maybe, one of them would reply and say, "Yeah, it's me." My parents didn't answer either. They were probably asleep and they weren't supposed to be back until Monday. There was no way I was going to say, "Who's there?" out loud. Instead, I quietly got out of bed and crept toward the corner of the room to hide. I reached into my dresser, grabbing the closest thing I could use as a blunt object, just in case whoever was out there tried to kick the door down and rush the bed. I'm not kidding when I say I stood frozen for at least 10 minutes. I didn't move from that spot. There wasn't another knock. Nothing. Finally, I called 911. I whispered as quietly as I could, just loud enough for the operator to hear me. I stayed on the line, explaining the situation, and waited while she dispatched officers to the house. I told her I didn't feel safe leaving the room and asked if she could direct the police to my bedroom window. Thankfully, I was on the first floor. Not long after, I heard a tap at the window. An officer stood outside. I quickly went over and opened it, handing him the key to the side door of the apartment. Moments later, I heard the door open. Only then did I leave my bedroom. 2 officers greeted me. I turned on all the lights as they did a quick sweep of my apartment. It didn't take long, there weren't many places to hide. Then we moved up to the main floor of the house. Room by room, we searched. Nothing. We went upstairs. I explained what each room was before they entered, just to give them a sense of the layout. When they got to my parents' bedroom, that's when I heard the commotion. About 30 seconds later, I was standing outside in the hallway when I heard shouting from inside the room. I peeked in for just a second, and that was all I needed. 2 officers were yelling at someone hiding under my parents' bed. A knot formed in my stomach. One of them told me to wait downstairs. Minutes later, they came down, escorting a tall, dirty, terrifying-looking man. He was wearing a sweatshirt and shorts. They asked me if I knew him. I said of course not. The look he gave me, it was haunting. Pure hatred. He looked like he could have been homeless. Crazy, or both. Once he was out of the house, I felt a million times better. The police told me that if I or my parents wanted to follow up, we should call the precinct. After they left, the first thing I did was text every family and friends group chat I had. But it was late. Only a few people responded. I called my parents first thing in the morning to explain everything. As you'd expect, they were in complete shock. But because the man was homeless and nothing was apparently stolen, my parents chose not to pursue legal action. To this day, I don't know exactly how he got in. It's possible I left the front door unlocked that night when Jay and Anthony came over and he simply walked right in while we were blasting music. Or, the scarier thought, maybe he had been in the house for much longer than that. And we just never knew. I've always loved the quiet. About 5 years ago, I moved to a little cabin in rural upstate New York, far away from the chaos of the city. The place is big, secluded, and surrounded by woods that stretch out for miles. My nearest neighbor is, well, not even close. The only sounds I hear are the wind in the trees and the occasional bird chirping off in the distance. It's peaceful. And that's exactly how I like it. Fishing is my thing. Most of my time is spent on the lake that sits just behind my house. It's the perfect escape from everything. I don't mind being alone. Honestly, I enjoy it. The cabin has a huge deck that overlooks the woods. I often sit out there with a cold beer in hand, watching the sun dip behind the trees and listening to the nighttime sounds. It's always been peaceful out here. At least, until recently. It started about 2 weeks ago. I was on the deck, like usual, just staring out into the dark when I heard something, the snap of a twig in the distance. I didn't think much of it. Probably a deer, or maybe a raccoon. The woods are full of life, and over the years I've gotten used to the noises. But as the days went by, the sounds became more frequent. At first, it was just the occasional twig snap or leaves rustling. Things I could easily explain away as animals. But then, one night, I heard something different. A scratching sound. It came from the side of the house somewhere near the window of the spare bedroom. It was faint, almost like it was trying to be sneaky. I stood up from my chair, heart beginning to beat a little faster than usual. I waited, listening, but nothing else happened. Probably just a squirrel, I told myself. But something didn't feel right. I decided to go back inside and lock everything up for the night. The next evening, I heard it again. That same scratching. But this time, it wasn't just on the side of the house. Now it was closer. It sounded like it was coming from directly outside the spare bedroom window. I froze, my body tense, nerves beginning to fray. I couldn't explain it, but something just felt off. I slowly made my way to the window, pulling the curtain back just slightly to peek outside. The moonlight lit up the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. The wind was still. Everything seemed normal. No animal. No person. I shook my head, trying to brush it off. Probably just a branch, I thought. Maybe the wind was playing tricks on me. I convinced myself it was nothing and went to bed. But the next night, the scratching came back. It returned. But it wasn't just scratching anymore. This time, it sounded like light tapping. Like someone was gently knocking on the window, trying to get my attention. My heart skipped a beat. I jumped out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and crept through the dark hallway toward the spare bedroom. When I reached the window, I flicked on the flashlight and aimed it outside. Nothing. No person. No animal. Just the same empty woods. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I couldn't explain it, but something felt wrong. The air around me was thick. Heavy. Like the air itself was pressing in. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every little sound seemed amplified, every creak of the floorboards felt like someone moving through the house. I lay there, wide awake, just listening. Eventually, I passed out from sheer exhaustion. But the nights went on and the sounds didn't stop. I'd hear them every night, always the same. A tap. A scratch. Sometimes even a faint whisper, like it was coming from inside the walls. I tried to ignore it, but that was becoming impossible. One night, I decided to confront it. Whatever it was, maybe it was just an animal, I told myself. A raccoon, maybe something that had found its way inside. I went out back and grabbed a crowbar from the shed, just in case things got weird. Then I returned to the spare bedroom and slowly opened the door. The air inside felt stale, like it hadn't been touched in ages. I hadn't used that room in months. I raised the flashlight and swept it around the room. Slowly. Every corner. Under the bed. Behind the dresser. Nothing. I stood there for a moment, feeling like an idiot. There was nothing there. It was just the same old room. Empty. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something. The closet door, it was slightly ajar. I didn't remember leaving it that way. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I walked over and pulled it open. Nothing. Nothing inside. But when I shone the flashlight into the back corner of the closet, I saw something strange. A small piece of cloth caught on the edge of the wall. It was dark. Torn. Almost like a scrap of clothing. My breath caught in my throat. My thoughts scattered. Was someone here? Had someone been inside my room? I backed out of the room, heart thudding in my chest. I slammed the door shut and bolted it. I couldn't stay in that house another second. I stepped outside, hoping the cool night air would clear my head. But the darkness of the woods felt like it was closing in on me. Still, I tried to shake it off. Maybe it's just my nerves, I told myself. Maybe the isolation is finally getting to me. That night, I slept on the couch, baseball bat within reach. But I didn't hear anything. No scratching. No tapping. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. The next night, I made a decision. I was going to be brave. I was going to sleep in my own bed. I wasn't going to let whatever this was drive me out of my house. But just as I was starting to drift off to sleep, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The window. I jumped up, heart pounding, and grabbed my flashlight. I ran to the spare bedroom, not even caring how loud my footsteps were. This time, when I pulled back the curtain, I didn't just see the woods. I saw a shadow. Someone was standing just outside the window, barely visible in the dim light. I froze. My blood ran cold. I turned around, my mind racing. I spun around. Who was that? What were they doing here? I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying it now. Someone had been outside my house, and they had been watching me. I ran to the phone, my hand shaking so much I could barely dial. The operator answered, and I could barely speak through the panic in my voice. Someone's been outside my house, I said. I think they're still here. I gave them my address, and they assured me they'd send someone out right away. I hung up and looked around the room. Frantic. I needed to leave. I couldn't stay here anymore. But as I turned to grab my jacket, I heard something from the hallway. A slow creak. Someone was moving through the house. Without hesitation, I ran for the back door, flinging it open and tearing through the woods. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping to look back. My lungs were burning with every step. By the time I reached the edge of the property, I could see the flashing lights of the police cars in the distance. I slowed down, body trembling, and hid behind a tree. I watched as the officers arrived, guns drawn, and began searching the house. But I didn't stick around to see what happened next. Couldn't. I knew that whatever or whoever had been in that house, it wasn't done. I wasn't safe there anymore. I haven't gone back since. I followed up with the police to let them know I was all right, so they wouldn't launch a search for me. The cabin is still there, sitting alone in the woods, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the tapping sounds. I don't know who was in my house or what they wanted. But I know, I'm not going back. One thing's for sure. They were waiting for me and they're still out there. This happened when I was about 15 years old, back in 2008. My parents went out to the casino for the night, so it was just me and my dog Abby home alone. It was around 11 p.m., and I was up messaging some friends on Instant Messenger and watching YouTube videos. As I was typing and chatting away, I heard Abby barking at something in the living room. I figured it might be my parents getting home, so I just waited. After about a minute of barking with no sound of the door opening, I got up and went into the living room to check it out. Abby was facing the windows that looked out onto our driveway, still barking. I couldn't really see outside because the lights were off and it was really dark. I peered through the window and saw only the one car in our driveway, so I knew my parents hadn't come home yet. I chalked it up to Abby possibly hearing a neighbor's car door slam shut or a particularly loud car driving by. We lived on a main road with lots of noise, even late at night. I went back to messaging my friends, but over the next 5 minutes, I kept feeling like I was hearing noises around the house. Abby would stop barking and then start again at different intervals. I was about to get up to calm her down when I could have sworn I heard a knock or a rustling sound at the living room door. I got up and slowly made my way back into the living room to look through the windows again. Nothing. I was starting to get a little nervous and too scared to look through the peephole, in case some crazy face was staring back at me. I double-checked to make sure the door was locked and was about to leave the room when the sound of knocking suddenly came from the side door of the house. The next afternoon, there was a knock at the front door. My heart immediately skipped a beat and I instinctively darted into another room. My dad opened my heart fluttered. I didn't know what to think. Was it my parents who got locked out? Were they trying to get in? Or was someone trying to break in? Was there more than one person? Before I could process these thoughts, I heard the sound of the doorknob from downstairs being jimmied like someone was trying to open it. Our basement was essentially under the house, with the entrance being pretty hidden. To get to that door, you had to walk around the entire house, go into our backyard, and crawl under the deck. You'd either need to already know the door was there or be really determined to find a way in. Abby was whimpering and barking louder than ever, running from room to room, trying to locate the threat. It felt like the whole house was surrounded. The noises from the basement grew louder, and it almost sounded like whoever it was had managed to get it open. Then, suddenly, the noise stopped. My heart sank. I stopped breathing, standing frozen in the silence, just waiting for the next sound. Then, quick as a whip, Abby flew down the stairs and started growling maniacally at whatever was down there. Abby was a good-natured black lab who had never hurt a fly, but in this moment I had never heard her sound more threatening. It felt like I was frozen in place for minutes. Finally, my fight-or-flight instinct kicked in when I realized Abby had stopped barking and growling. I called her upstairs and locked the door inside the house that led to the basement. I grabbed the home phone, since I didn't have a cell phone yet, and ran with Abby into the closet in my parents' room where one of the guns we owned was stored. I sat there, armed and ready, about to call 911 when I suddenly heard the front door open. Abby sprinted out. I yelled no after her, but then heard the sound of my parents' voices. I ran into the living room to see them petting Abby and looking at me strangely. I spent the next several minutes recounting the events of the night to my parents. My mom was horrified, and my dad spent the next hour searching every corner of the house, inside and out, with his gun in hand. We didn't find anything, and I didn't sleep that night. Door to find my Uncle Pete standing there with an envelope in his hand. Uncle Pete was a narcissistic creep, to say the least. He always mistreated my aunt and acted very weird around the kids and cousins at family parties. Nothing illegal, as far as we knew, but he just had this way about him. You knew to try to avoid him growing up. I always felt a bit anxious whenever he talked to me. I can't remember anything specific he may have said, but his overall demeanor was unsettling. Even adults who spent too much time around him said he made them uncomfortable. I played softball, and his daughter, my cousin Kate, played in a league a few years below mine. I loved my cousin and always felt bad for her having such a creepy dad, so I would often give her tips or help out her team with pitching and fielding lessons. One day, my mom and I eavesdropped from another room and overheard Uncle Pete say something like, "I tried to stop by last night to drop it off, but no one was home." I couldn't hear much else, but shortly after, I heard my dad slam the door shut. My mom and I peeked out and asked what happened. My dad, his face quivering with anger, said that apparently Uncle Pete had been the one stomping around the house last night, trying to get inside. He handed me the envelope and I opened it to find a card with a gift card inside, thanking me for helping his daughter with softball lessons, a night of panic and terror, all at the hands of my creepy uncle. My dad had threatened him during the conversation at our front door, and after that, we never really spent time with him again. When I think about this story now, I'm at least glad I found out who was behind the incident. Otherwise, I might have spent years wondering if it had been burglars, a ghost, or something else. I'm thankful Abby was there to protect me. She most certainly scared him off when he was trying to get in through the basement. But even so, I'm still left with so many questions. What the hell was he thinking? Why did he need to drop that card off so late at night? Why didn't he get the hint that we weren't home when no one answered the front door? Why didn't he try calling the house to see if we were home? And worst of all, what would have happened had he gotten inside?